Here we are at the rear suspension. This is the right rear. We're looking upward at the inside of the wheel assembly. We have a few places to check here for wear. This is our lower control arm. We have a rubber bushing at this end and a rubber bushing at this end. Here we'll check for movement of the rubber bushing. We do expect to have some movement, but not much. We're stressing the rubber here, so that's good. I'm pulling and it's just barely moving. Up on the inboard end, we'll pry this way and down the side, and we really got no movement. This is nice and tight. Now up top, this aluminum plate is a combination spring plate. We have the spring up above, sitting above this area, and we also have a bushing and a bushing. We'll check these as well. This is easier to check with the wheel off, to check for the play out here, and we would do that once we had the wheel off to check up there. Now one other note, this bushing here on this 3 Series model is also the camber adjustment. There's small little tabs on either side of the washers. Sometimes if this bolt and nut are not tightened adequately, these tabs can get worn away as the bolt moves. You just make sure the tabs are in place, the washer is seated on the tabs, and everything looks good there. We'll also look at the shock mount bushing, look for cracking or bulging. This one looks good. Now, while we're at this end, this is our sway bar and our sway bar connector link. We have rubber here. We'll look for cracking or bulging. And on the top end, there's rubber also. We'll do the same thing. Look for cracking or bulging. Any obvious movement other than just moving the rubber. This looks good. We also have the rubber mount bushings here. Same thing. Cracking or bulging, or able to move at all. Now, our axle is here. We have a constant velocity joint here and one over here. These boots protect the joint and hold in the lubricating grease on each end. To check these axles, we grab the axle shaft and we try to turn it. This has no turning at all, which is correct. If you can turn this axle in relationship to this end or this end, the CV joint is worn and should be replaced. Now additionally, you may notice when you grab this, the axle will move in and out. That's normal and that's good. We just do not want any radial play. Look at the boots, look for cracking. We want no cracking on these boots. If any fluid is actually coming out, any grease, then the boot has cracked, it's leaking the grease out, and dirt and moisture is getting in and is going to ruin the CV joint. We want to get those boots replaced immediately if we find any cracking. Now in addition, as with the front, we want to look at the brake caliper. Here's our bleeder screw. Put that cap back on to protect it. We want to look for any leakage of brake fluid anywhere. Look at the hose. Look for cracking on the hose. Any cracking on the hose, it needs to be replaced. We have a hose here and a hose here going up to the chassis. Our park brake cable, just inspect the casing for cracking. And as with the front on this car with the adaptive headlights, we have a link on the suspension which goes to a control unit and tells the headlight system what the suspension height is to aim the headlights. Just inspect, make sure everything's in place and proper. Now, one final thing, which you will not be able to see. You see our trailing arm coming here. It comes up behind the gas tank and up into the chassis area. There's a large bushing here, and this locates the whole rear suspension. I'm going to put the pry bar against the bushing and the pocket that the bushing's in and pry. You can see it moving a little bit. Now I'm giving it a fair amount of force. This is going to be normal for this bushing to move this much. And I'm going to pry it forward and back or up and down, and it doesn't move very much either. That's okay. This is a good bushing. Let's take a look at the differential. Look for any big oil leaks. Is it fully wet, or is it just kind of moist with some dirt stuck to the moisture? Not uncommon. Our drain plug is here and our fill plug is on the back over here. Look for any leakage there. Look for leakage down past the output where the axle comes out, or all the way at the front where the drive shaft comes in. This one's in good shape. It's just a little bit moist on the bottom from changing the fluid. There's no big wet drips anywhere on it, so this is in good shape. Now, while we're under the vehicle in the rear, we are on the passenger side here. The exhaust on this vehicle runs on the driver's side, so you can't see it in this frame, but it would run right through this area. We want to look at the piping and look at the muffler can. Look for any signs of heavy rust or leakage where you see black carbon stains from exhaust. And do that throughout the exhaust system. Just give it a good quick look while you're underneath. Grab it, wiggle it around, see if the mounts need replacing or if it's good and solid. With that, we're done with this area of the vehicle. We're going to check some bearings and brake assemblies. Now here we are at the left front wheel. We're going to show you here an example of checking for wheel bearing play. We're going to look at the brakes. We're going to look at the shock absorber. So first, we'll look for wheel bearing play. This is easy enough. We grab the wheel at 3 and 9 and try to wobble it. Now the movement you see right here, we're actually moving the steering system. We can look at the steering wheel and it's slightly moving. There's no clunk. It'd be clunk, clunk if we had bearing play. Additionally, in this direction, no play. Spins freely, no noises. I can hear the brake pads on the caliper slightly. I don't know if the mic will pick that up. There you go. Now, so that's great. We're going to take the wheel off. We'll check the brakes and the shock absorber. Here we are at the left front with the wheel removed. We've got our brake rotor, caliper, pads, and some other points we're going to inspect here. First off, let's take a look at the rotor. We want to look for any real heavy, scaly rust along the outside here where the vents are. We want to look at the surface, and we want it to be basically smooth. As you can see, this one actually has a reflection. It's shiny enough that it's reflecting. We just don't want any heavy grooving here. And we'll look for a lip right here. This one has actually a moderate amount of a lip. And that's from the rotor wearing down as the pads press on it. It actually removes material from the rotor. And this will continue to get deeper. There's a specification for how thick the rotor can be for service. That's always stamped on the outside of the rotor. On a rusty rotor, you may not be able to see it. The specifications are in the Bentley repair manual as well. And we can use a mic or a caliper to determine the thickness and if this rotor needs to be replaced, even though the surface is still serviceable itself. Now on the brake caliper, we want to make sure the anti-rattle clip is still present. The brake pad wear sensor, which is only on the left front and the right rear on BMW models. Look for any grease or brake fluid indicating leakage. Here's our brake hose, the fluid hose. Inspect that for cracks, just as we did when we were under the car. And on the brake pads, we can see through this port how thick the brake pads are. Here on the inner pad and over here on the outer pad. If we look through this port, we can actually see the pad thickness, and we can determine, are these pads close to needing replacement. Now additionally, what we've got in here, here's our swaybar end link, the upper portion of it. We showed you inspecting the lower joint. From here we can inspect and determine play on the upper joint. And to follow up on the shock absorber here, which is commonly called the strut or strut cartridge, we have the spring. Look for any braking on the spring. And on the shaft itself, is this all oily and is it wet with oil up here, which this one isn't. So this one is still good and serviceable. Might be worn to some degree, but it's not leaking. If it's leaking, it needs to be replaced. Continue through with the brake hose, the wires for the ABS wheel speed sensor running through here, and the brake wear sensor. And just take a general inspection of your inner shields and the rest of the items in the area. Look for anything out of place. So there we have it. A very complete vehicle inspection for your BMW or Mini. This can be performed at home. You don't have to have a lift like we do. You can do this with a floor jack and jack stands, just as we did. You'll be rolling around on a creeper on the floor instead of walking underneath, but everything is basically the same. Following these tips, these inspections, you'll catch items that might be failing or need service before you have a catastrophic failure and either have a safety issue or just an inconvenience on the side of the road and higher expense in repairs. With that, we'd love it if you hit your like button if you like this video. Leave us some comments, let us know how we're doing, and don't forget, everything here, all the service items and repair items that you might find are available at BavAuto.com. That's BavAuto.com.